The VjM03 is definitely an evolution of the VjM02. In terms of the design philosophies that we have at Force India, that the design philosophies that we've developed over the last year or two, we're quite happy with the direction that they're taking us. So therefore, we've opted to evolve the car. Obviously, one of the things that we've had to contend with are regulation changes, which have had a not inconsiderable impact in some respects on the design of the car. So when we factor some of those into account, the cars are different. The cars look different in terms of the overall length, for instance, which is perhaps probably the most dramatic feature of the design of the cars, but it is very much an evolution. Very much so. The removal of refuelling from the races obviously increases the capacity of fuel that we have to store on the car, and it's a considerable increase. It's approaching twice the amount of fuel that we ran in 2009. What that means is that we either make the car much longer or wider in the fuel cell area, or a combination of both. And it's probably no surprise that it is a combination of both, and we iterated quite a few solutions to arrive at the fuel cell design that we have. And the way that impacts on the design of the car, if you make the fuel cell wider, then the radiators are alongside the fuel cell, so they have to be narrower, which in turn impacts on the cooling. So that's one impact. The other one is if you make the fuel cell longer, it makes the wheelbase of the car longer, which influences the handling of the car mechanically, and also the aerodynamics of the car with respect to diffuser and bodywork. With the ban of double diffusers for 2011, it does influence the development programme, but we recognise that we still have to push as hard as we can with the current double diffusers for 2010. Because we have targets to move as far towards the front of the field as we can, and the double diffuser is a key development aspect of the car. So that's one area that we'll be pushing very hard to gain more downforce from for competitiveness during this season. However, we know that they won't be there for 2011, so what we'll have to do is run a parallel programme for a period of time, probably 2 or 3 months, that allows us to get a head start on that for 2011. The resource restriction that we have for 2010, this year, will in fact not significantly influence the way Force India operates. On the contrary, we believe that even if it's not that significant in 2010, over the next year or two, it brings other teams towards us in terms of our operating environment from a financial perspective and a staff resource perspective. So it's in our favour, and there won't be really any negatives for us as a team during this season. Having the partnership with McLaren and Mercedes does influence the design of the car. The most obvious way in which that happens is that the gearbox does come from the McLaren, so we therefore have limitations on freedom of rear suspension design. Whilst the two cars are different in that respect, the attachment points that we have available are basically the same as the McLaren car. It's the same gearbox casing. So that's a limitation. Having said that, I don't mean it's a limitation in a negative respect. It's just that we don't have total freedom. So that influences the rear suspension layout to some extent. Overall, it's a very positive partnership. And I think we've benefited from having a very strong, reliable gearbox and engine package in 2009, and we look forward to that this season also. VjM02 was a low drag car. We didn't necessarily intend to have a car that had less drag than our competitors, but the car started life in that configuration because that's where we pitched our downforce and drag levels. As was demonstrated throughout the 2009 season, there were a couple of circuits where that particularly was a useful attribute. As we go into 2010 with the VjM03, we've tried to maintain a high level of aerodynamic efficiency, which in part will mean minimising drag, but we recognise that overall our championship position would be enhanced by a general level of performance that was raised on the majority of the circuits. So the emphasis has shifted slightly, but we still have quite an efficient car aerodynamically. Many months ago, the team opted to miss the first of the team tests. This was a very deliberate plan to enable us to develop the car aerodynamically right up until the last opportunity to give the required lead times to manufacture the parts. It's always a balancing act between developing the car to a point at which you're happy to freeze the design and then do the full-scale design and issue parts for manufacture, and actually being able to have sufficient parts available at the first one or two races.